In this video, we are gonna talk about you, and I want you to be the hero of your movie. And I mean it quite literally because not only am I gonna watch a movie in 1 hour, but I want you to more metaphorically understand that your life is essentially a movie and you are the main character. And so let's talk about this metaphor for a moment because if you are a fan of most movies, especially the superhero ones, they very fundamentally, on a fundamental level, they follow a very basic storyline, right? There's always a main character, there's a villain, the hero goes through some pain, suffering, and adversity, and eventually he defeats the villain, and then basically a happy end. Now, most narratives of most movies we see in Hollywood and, in fact, other industries, Bollywood, whatsoever, most of them follow the same type of narrative. And it's the reason why these movies make literally millions and millions of dollars because they basically satisfy this one narrative, and that, you know, for us as a consumer, as somebody watching the movie, that's something we enjoy, right? And Jordan Peterson, in his 12 Rules of Life, within his book, he reiterates this point a little bit more clearly, so you could read it there if you want to. But there has to be a reason on why we, as a watcher, as a spectator of these movies, are so fascinated about the storylines. Yes, the movies might have a good context. Yes, you know, there's the CGI and all of that animation type things, but there's something more deeply rooted into our neurology within our brain that makes us want to watch these movies, and hence why it's really enjoyable for us. And it's basically because if you watch the movie, there is, to a very deep layer of yourself, some type of personal reflection. Now, let me explain, because I'm not saying that you are a superhero and you're gonna shoot laser out of your eyes and fly around, but coming back to the idea of a narrative, you essentially go through the same type of story. Now, let me elaborate on this a little bit more, because if you want to be a hero, and quite literally a hero of your own movie, you are basically want to conquer something, right? And essentially that is going to be a villain. But you are not defeating some type of monster. From a psychological perspective, you're actually defeating yourself. And so basically what you're trying to do is you're gonna create a so-called villain, right? And so this villain is basically yourself, but your villain contains these sorts of weakness and envy and evil and resentment, all of these negative characteristics. Just imagine that that villain is you with those type of characteristics, right? And so your objective in your movie, or in other words, in your life, is to defeat that villain, right? And every person's villain is different. Every person's villain is basically a negative characteristics of who you are, and I'm sure that each one of you guys know what type of negative characteristics you guys have. If you're unsure, I want you guys to read the literature on Carl Jung talking about his shadow, because when you figure out your shadow is essentially a deep rooted personality, a deep rooted persona of yourself, and your shadow is not necessarily negative, but it contains specific type of characteristics that would make up that specific villain that I'm trying to describe. And so once you understand that, one, your villain exists, number two is important to identify what type of characteristics your villain has, right? And so once you understand the type of bad characteristics or the bad traits that your villain has, and it's, to be honest, not that quite difficult to figure out, because you basically, how you can figure out right now is you basically have your positive traits, your characteristics, and find literally quite the contrast or quite the opposite of that characteristic. For example, if you are a punctual person, then imagine the total opposite, right? You being late. If you're a very organized person, just imagine you being messy. If you are an introvert, just imagine yourself being the extrovert. If you are, I don't know, a very positive person, then you are essentially a negative one. And so in your movie, in your lifeline, in your story, right? You're watching this video, you are existing on this planet Earth. Your sole mission is to basically defeat that villain. And so once you have defeated that villain, something magical happens, right? And that magical thing that happens is basically you uncover a version of yourself, a reality of yourself, that you are absolutely undestructible, right? Or in other words, you can essentially do anything that you want in this world. If you defeat your villain, you basically understand your weaknesses and you've overcome them, right? And so basically you're living on this plane of earth with a set of strengths. And who knows the type of potential, the type of, possibilities you can unlock, the type of things you can do. Just imagine that you defeated your villain with his negative characteristics and you unlock that good in yourself, that you're able to do anything in this planet Earth. Just imagine that for a second.